Good Wednesday, everyone. Welcome to a special Wednesday mailbag edition of the Volquest.com podcast presented by our good friends at Blue Water Climate Control. Remember, for all of your AC and heating and air needs, you need to check out Blue Water Climate Control. Whatever repair you need, they're going to do it the right way the first time with guys who know what they're doing. They're not going to upsell you on something that you don't need, but they're going to take care of whatever you do need to get you back cool in the house during these hot summer months. So be sure and give them a call if you have any issues at all at 865-299-2290, or check them out online at bluewaterclimatecontrol.com. They offer a variety of services, but anybody who's dealing with air conditioning issues in this heat, you need to give them a call immediately and they get somebody out there to take care of whatever need you have. As I mentioned, it's a special edition of the Mailbag Podcast this week, and special contributors this week. We've got Austin Price, the regular standby stalwart of the Mailbag Podcast and the Volquest.com podcast, and also joined by Ben McKee and Eric Kane. Guys, glad to have you along with us. Plenty to get to in this podcast, so let's jump right into it. Question number one out of the gate: which true freshman will have the best season this fall, and who would you bet, and would you bet on having the best career or finish to their career at UT? Austin Price, to start with you. What do you got, brother?
Well, I'll go with Jaylen Wright. As far as newcomers, you could say Anderson Kobe, but I think running back Jaylen Wright, who was here in the spring, makes a ton of sense for a potential guy to have the best season. I know, Brent, you specifically have one that may end up having a really, really good career, and I don't disagree with you in the least. But as far as this year, I will go Jaylen Wright overall. That's just too hard to tell. I mean, they're just now getting here. I mean, there's been plenty of guys that have come through here that I would have said were going to be great. They ended up being just okay, and guys that I thought were going to be okay that turned out to be really good players.
Yeah, I like Miles Campbell for a long-term career at Tennessee. I like what he did in the spring. It's only one small sample size, but he seems to have the ability to play all the positions at tight end. He can flex out. He can play in line. He can play some H-back for you. But you never know how his body's going to adjust and change over the time of his career. So he would be on my list for a long-term guy. And I think he can help him some this year, but I think he would be a long-time guy. Ben and Eric, what do you guys got? Who do you think?
Yeah, for this year, I'm with AP. I go Jaylen Wright for this particular season. I thought he had a really nice spring, and it's kind of a hodgepodge at the running back rotation right now. Didn't really get to see Tyon Evans, so who knows how he slates in once he gets healthy. But Tyon Evans really impressed and was probably, at least in my eyes, the most impressive back behind Jabari Small this spring. So I think Jaylen Wright will be at least in the 3 deep. Maybe he works himself into the 2 deep if Tyon Evans comes along too slowly once fall camp starts. But long term, in terms of who will have the best career, I think it's going to be William Parker Griffin, the offensive lineman from Percombe there in the mid-state, a guy that Nick Saban really wanted. And he kind of reminds me of Ramon Foster coming out of high school, just an underrated offensive lineman, a nasty offensive lineman, probably an interior guy. I guess that hasn't technically been officially decided, but I think William Parker Griffin, just his nastiness, his work ethic, I think it's gonna play well for him, and I think he's gonna have a great career.
Wow, that's a good one. I hadn't thought about that. I'll give you props for the comparison to Ripley's own Ramon Foster out of that. Eric, it's really interesting when you look at this. You look at the true freshmen and you kind of don't know, because these guys weren't really recruited by Josh Heupel. Then you look at the transfers and you look at some of the JUCO stuff that Tennessee's got done. If you're throwing those guys into the mix, who do you have for this year? Who do you have long term, Eric?
Yeah, this year, I think right out of the gate, Byron Young is a guy that was so very impressive during spring. He drew praise from Rodney Gardner, from Tim Banks, from Cade Mays, Cooper Mays, Jerome Carvin. It seems like everybody continued to talk about what Byron Young did this spring, his explosion off the line of scrimmage, his moves, being able to line up in different type of spots. So this year, I think Byron Young can play a big impact. And, over the course of his career at Tennessee, I like Anderson Kobe as well. AP mentioned him a little earlier. A little slow out of the gate this spring, but I think he can line up in different spots. He's got good speed. He's got some good hands. And I think that in this offense, a guy like Anderson Kobe could really flourish. So those two guys, this year, more Byron Young this year and Kobe long-term.
All right, let's go to recruiting next with a question. AP, would the Vols possibly take 4 wide receivers in this class? Looks like there's still a good bit of talent considering Tennessee at that position. Do you think Tennessee would go 4 wide receivers? We've talked about 3, but there are a bunch of names on the board. Could Tennessee go 4 there?
Yeah, I think they could. With Squirrel White doing something coming up on Thursday and Tennessee sitting pretty there, it'd be, if they don't take 4, then that means one of the kids that are in-state kids, isn't coming if they all wanted to come. So I think if they want in, they would take them. I just think that makes too much sense. They've got to. You can't have the whole, Tennessee takeover stuff and then, choose to take, and part of it's, self-inflicted, part of it not, but only take, 3-4 kids in state, I think, take as many kids as you can get in state, and most of these are receivers.
Yeah, Isaiah Horton, obviously. I think the Caden Pope situation is a little bit interesting because he's talking about taking a visit in the fall, and I would have said back in the spring that he would have been off the board in August. I'm a little bit surprised, kind of where he's at, talking about taking some visit, maybe that Auburn visit there, and then obviously you got Cam Miller as well. So yeah, I mean, if you're going to take the in-state guys, then and you're taking Squirrel White, then Tennessee needs to take up to 4 receivers in this class. And so we will see what happens first with Squirrel White talking, coming down on Thursday, and then we'll see kind of where it goes from there for sure. Moving on, the consensus seems to be that, I'm sorry, I skipped one here. Is there any chance that the Vols get off easier than otherwise would have due to the NCAA being uncertain of its legal status after the Supreme Court case, meaning, name, image, likeness? This is something that's kind of been talked about, brewing out there a little bit. I don't know that it's been a ton, but it is an interesting scenario, Ben, when you look at this from the standpoint of, does Tennessee go as aggressive with a self-imposed penalty? Are they less with their self-imposed penalty because of, a lot of the things they're going to penalize themselves for are now legal, potentially. So do you sit here and say, hey, maybe we don't do the bowl ban, and maybe it's some scholarships here or there? I think that it's unknown if Tennessee's stance on how significant their self-imposed punishment is going to be, and would you change it based on where the NCAA seems to be right now with the lack of teeth? I mean, is anybody coming after LSU now? Is the Louisville stuff ever going to get resolved? Is Arizona ever going with the changing rules with the NCAA and them seemingly losing some power? So I think it's an kind of an interesting spot that Danny White and Chancellor Plowman are in terms of how they're going to, do they shift sort of the direction this investigation has gone in terms of how aggressive they are with the NCAA?
I think they should try. I think they should try at all costs to deflect from what was going on or what was found. I'll be curious to see if they can, because it seems as if what Tennessee got in trouble for doesn't necessarily fall under the NIL umbrella, to where guys were making money, off of their name, image, and likeness. It seems like Tennessee's issues that got them in trouble were in other areas that, again, in my opinion, I'll be curious to hear what Eric thinks, but did not fall under the umbrella of the name, image, and likeness that is going on. So I think they should absolutely try. It doesn't hurt to try. I mean, at this point, what does Tennessee have to lose? But I just think with everything that's the NCAA appears to have uncovered, or even what Tennessee uncovered, to the point to where they felt it was necessary to fire a head coach and 9 assistants and then several recruiting staff members. It seems to me like that was a level of sloppiness that wasn't just under the name, image, and likeness umbrella.
Yeah, I would agree with Ben. I think the majority of what Tennessee already kind of, self-imposed, that did this investigation, that fired its whole staff, it's already been more than willing to work with the NCAA. Now, are you hoping that the NCAA will be more lenient because of all that? Maybe so, but look like Tennessee's already self-imposed a lot of stuff, in my opinion. But I'm with Ben. I think a lot of it is more recruiting violations that doesn't necessarily revolve around, not a little bit maybe, but not everything around the name, image, and likeness. So I'm not really sure how much the two might be correlated, to be honest.
But Austin,
Tennessee going to self-impose 1 year, Brent. Like, and if they self-impose anything more than that, then that's just dumb. Like, I mean, you're going to self-impose less. Hope the NCAA is just like, yeah, that's fine. Let's go. Let's keep just keep the wheels turning. Keep the lights on.
Well, yeah, it's a good point, because I mean, for years, here's the deal. I mean, for you were trying to balance the don't completely crucify yourself, but impose enough to where the NCAA says, hey, we're done. We're not going to come look anymore. But the NCAA has been through this thing the whole time, Austin. So do you have to worry about, okay, if we don't self-impose enough, now they're going to suddenly open this investigation up and turn it into something else? I mean, can the NCAA, I mean, do they have enough people to even come out and really investigate anything at this point in time? So I don't know that you have to worry about that balance as much as you once did. And that's why I'll be curious to see what Tennessee does self-impose whenever they get to that point, and they do elect to self-impose, which I think is going to happen in the next, 8 weeks. I think you're going to know something on that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's kind of the direction things are going. So
every
how much
school,
juice
Brent,
does the NCAA have,
every school has Tennessee pegged for 2, 3, 4 years, and they want it to be that because that's what they've told every recruit out there. And it doesn't matter if you're at the lowest levels of a group of 5 or at the major Power 5. Anybody you talk to that's not at Tennessee says the same jargon. Oh, they're going to get hammered. Oh, if they get hammered, then something's wildly wrong with all of this.
Yep,
because of the fact that all these other schools aren't. I mean, like if I was Tennessee, I would self-impose the bare minimum and we'll take this. We'll see you guys next time, and move on and dare them to do anything, because I just don't think they would.
All right, let's move on to the next question here. The consensus seems to be that Tennessee will score a lot more points by going fast. Aside from the fact that that has not always been true for Heupel against better defenses, the best offenses in the SEC, such as Alabama and Ole Miss last year and LSU in 2019, were more scheme and talent than fast. Fast was only used occasionally. I don't agree with that. Other than we have more offensive talent and we will run more plays, why the confidence that the fast means success? Well, I mean, I think the fast means success because that's where college football's at, Eric. I mean, that's how the game is played. And Ole Miss didn't occasionally go fast. Ole Miss went fast.
Yeah.
They went fast the whole time, and that's, that doesn't mean Tennessee's going to be able to line up and do everything against Alabama that Ole Miss did. I mean, a lot of it. I mean, it was schemed. There's no question. That's why Lane Kiffin's thought to be, what he is. Joe Brady's obviously where he's at in the NFL now because of what he did at LSU. We know Alabama's coordinators that have come through there, but defensive coordinators, a defensive-minded league doesn't like to go fast. And a lot of guys in this league are trying to go fast to cause problems to those defensive-minded head coaches. Jeremy Pruitt hated teams that went fast. That's the truth.
Yeah, I mean, it's something you have to prepare for. You don't see this. Yeah, there might be 2 teams in the league doing this, Ole Miss and Tennessee. LSU did it a little bit, a couple of years ago, but you don't see this week in and week out. And so you have to take extra time to prepare. And there's going to be a scheme behind it. There always is, and certain personnel packages and all that, and how you could run certain things with the same people on the field and vice versa. So for a defense, it's awful when you get out there and run the ball. You're snapping it every 15 to 20 seconds. Now, there will be some 3 and outs that will take a minute 5 off the clock. That's just kind of part of this offense. So it's not always going to be roses. Tennessee has some talent on the offensive end to where I think that it can give yourself some chances, not only to score points, but to kind of control the game a little bit, because your defense is going to need all the help it can get. But as a defender, it's something that it's more that you have to prepare for, more than the quarterback, more than the running back and the 2 wide receivers and all that type of stuff. It's just another added pressure, as you mentioned, for this defensive-minded league, because you don't see it every week.
The one thing that I think, when looking at these other teams is Matt Corral's a playmaker. He's, he made them, I know they were a 500 team last year, but the reason they were exciting on offense is because the plays he made. So, like, can Tennessee find a quarterback that can be a playmaker, whether that's Harrison Bailey or Joe Milton or Hendon Hooker or whoever? Can they figure out the quarterback position? All of it is semantics until they figure out the quarterback.
You're 100% right.
With that. Yeah.
You're 100% right. You can go fast, you can go slow, you can go backwards, forwards, or sideways. It doesn't matter if your quarterback play is not good enough. And if you haven't learned that over the last couple of years watching Tennessee football, then you just haven't been watching Tennessee football, because that's the bottom line. Nobody at any level of football is winning without quality quarterback play. They're just not. Nobody is, surprising or upsetting people with average quarterback play. It just doesn't happen. All right, on to the next one. How does this staff look at recruiting rankings and stars? To me, it seems like Kiffin and Butch really kept up with them. It seems like Pruitt didn't pay much attention to them, as you would see him take 3 stars, usually from Alabama or Georgia, over 4 stars from Tennessee and other states. Would you agree with those statements? Heupel is offering a lot of 5.63 stars. Is this more of a sign of struggling in recruiting or trusting their evaluations? Do you think we'll see a lot of dramatic changes in the rivals rankings after these summer camps? I don't think you'll see a ton of huge jumps and swings in the rival rankings after the summer camps, because they saw most of these kids throughout the spring and early part of summer with the Rivals Camp Series. So I don't think you're going to see major swings there. So I'll take that one. Austin, what do you say about kind of Heupel's recruiting, right now? And I would agree that Jeremy Pruitt didn't pursue some guys in Tennessee, particularly early on. I don't think he believed as much in some of the prospects in the state of Tennessee versus some prospects in other states, because of what he felt like the overall competition level of high school football was. That's my belief.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. This staff was running a little bit of those as well. I mean, they, again, couldn't figure out whether they wanted to go all in or all out on, Jalen Lewis and Anthony Brown. They kind of had their feet in the pool, but that was about it, and then there are other guys that, just were moved on by the time they got hired, or didn't give them really any kind of, as much as they tried, they didn't get them, never got Dallin Hayden to campus, then, there's a group of guys in the mid-state that never made it to campus, whether it's Fisher Anderson or D'Arco Perkins or Barryon Brown, they never made it here in the whole month of June. So, where's that lie? I mean, I know Tennessee, sure tried, and so, I don't know. I mean, I think right now that Tennessee's just recruiting, the kids they can recruit, and the ones they have an in on, like an Addison Nichols or a Cam Miller, they got to land those kids. But right now they're recruiting a different level of kid, because they are getting hammered out there. Nobody wants to listen to that, but I talk to kids, and it's not surprising at all that something you hear on a common theme, whether it's JUCO kids, high school kids, is all these schools are just hammering Tennessee's out, penalties, and Tennessee can't definitively say that those schools are wrong because they have nothing yet. So, for me, I just think it's just, it's evaluations. Tennessee's not just taking kids to take kids or offering kids to offer kids. They offer the kids the best available. And, I think that's kind of like, especially like look at corner, like they've had 4 or 5 come off the board that Tennessee just didn't get, so they're going to have to reevaluate when they get, when they get back to work here in a couple of weeks coming off vacation, as far as like kind of what direction they want to go with that position.
All right. With this supposedly being a big month for commitments, when does the real movement start for Tennessee? I don't know, Austin, we've talked about this. I didn't expect a ton of commits in the month of June for Tennessee for the very reasons you just said. I think Tennessee was trying to stay in the game with some kids with visits in the month of June. I think they were trying to get the attention of some kids in the month of June and get face-to-face with them. But I did not expect Tennessee to have some huge run in the month of June in terms of commitments. I don't think they'll have a huge run this summer. They may have a couple more commits, but I don't think there's going to be one of those, hey, they get 6 guys in 7 days type deals. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see that coming.
No, I think they can get 3 to 4 more by the time high school football starts in August 20th. I think that, and potentially, you look at Cam Miller. I think he does something in the month of July. Isaiah Horton's going to do something before his senior year starts. And So is Addison Nichols. Now, those are the three I've outlined that I think are the keys to the class. If you don't get, one or two of them, I think it's a huge blow. And if you get all three, I think it's a huge step in the right direction and changes kind of the outline of the class. And then if you go win a few football games and show you're competitive in the games you do lose and score some points and get a little excitement going, who knows what happens? Again, it's like kind of what comes first, the chicken or the egg. For Tennessee, they needed, the season to get here, to help get recruits, but they also need to get a few recruits before the season got here. So, for me, I look at, the next 6 weeks, and I think you're going to see a bunch of kids come off the board, not just for Tennessee, across college football, because I think a lot of kids are kind of reevaluating where they are coming off of that whirlwind June. And a lot of kids want to do something and have their spot reserved before their senior year starts.
All right,
so all of July and middle of August.
All right. As a follow-up to that, assuming the NCAA stuff is resolved by the end of 2021, what can this year's team realistically do to ensure that the Ty Simpsons and Wade twins and future classes don't go elsewhere? Pull a major upset, beat Bama, Georgia, Florida, or play Georgia, Bama, Florida close, throw it all over the yard, score a ton of points? Or should we just accept the fact that the SEC is too competitive for us to consistently be in the top 75 percentile on a consistent basis? All right, Eric, what does Tennessee got to do? I mean, let's break it down. I mean, I think we all agree they got to win, but is it about how you win? Is it about playing people close? Is it about relationships, or is it a combination of a whole bunch of things that Tennessee's got to do to establish themselves better in the recruiting trails?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little all the above. First and foremost, the first thing that jumped out to me is stop getting blown out. I mean, you're losing games by 24 points or more, against, of course, your big rivals in Florida, Georgia's, the Alabamas, but there's some other teams in the SEC. That's got to stop. You want to have an exciting brand of football. We talk about this offense and high octane, running a lot of plays, scoring a lot of points. That's great and all, but also on defense, you might give up some points. Brian, I've heard you say this a couple of times, but can you bow your back and have a big third down stop? Can you stop them in the red zone, force field goals? Just stay competitive in that regard and have an exciting brand of football. And offensively, that should not be hard to do considering where quarterback play has been, the offense overall scoring 21 points and a half per game last year. It really shouldn't be that hard to improve. Now, how much improvement how's that going to stack up against the rest of the SEC? It's probably a 2-year plan, but nonetheless, I think it's a little bit of that. And then of course the ongoing relationships, which I do think, and everybody I've talked to and prospects I've talked to, this staff's done a really nice job building those relationships, holding conversations outside of just football and just the normal recruiting pitch, really getting to know the player, the family, stuff like that. So I would think it's a little bit of all the above. Of course, if you pull off an upset against Georgia, Florida, Alabama, that's going to help. But I don't know if that will be the case here this coming fall.
Hey, Ben, let me ask you this. With name, image, likeness coming down the pike the way it is, does that make in-state recruiting easier for teams? Because it's easier to get a deal if you're an in-state player than say you go and be a guy who travels 1,000 miles from home, or you go 2 states over, 3 states over. I mean, I guess my point is if you're from Middle Tennessee and you come play at Tennessee, is it easier for you to get deals back home with name, image, likeness because you're still staying in your state where you're a statewide brand at a place that's a statewide brand, as opposed to, hey, I'm going to Florida and I want to endorse a product as a Florida player back in my hometown in a state of a rival SEC school?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it also depends on the school, because you take a school like Vanderbilt, and if I'm a business there in Nashville, and I'm pointing out Vanderbilt because Vanderbilt likes to sell its city, because Nashville, obviously a great city. That's a big selling point for Vanderbilt. But if I'm a business owner in the city of Nashville, I mean, outside of your Kyle Shermers, I mean, your Jordan Rodgers, your Jordan Matthews, I mean, outside of a handful, I would rather have a Tennessee football player advertising my product, because the Power T is more sought after statewide. It sells more even in Nashville, even despite another SEC school being in that city. Tennessee is such a big brand that it carries its own weight throughout the entire state. And I think that could even apply to the city of Memphis. I know Memphis is quite a ways away from Knoxville. There's so many SEC schools that are closer to Memphis than Tennessee, and maybe the conversation becomes more interesting when you talk about Memphis basketball players. And sure, Memphis football has had quite the players the last couple of years. Riley Ferguson, several NFL backs in the league now. But even if I'm a business owner in the state of Memphis, I mean, there's still power tees everywhere. And I think I would rather have a Jawan Jennings or a Josh Dobbs, a Jalen Hurd prior to him leaving, and Alvin Kamara, a big-time player on Tennessee's roster, or Derek Barnett. I'd rather have those guys advertise for me than a Memphis player, than a Vanderbilt player in Nashville, because I think the Power T brand is so big and so powerful. So to kind of tie it into recruiting, I do think a team like Tennessee that seems so far behind from the big schools in the SEC, I think it can make up ground because of the NIL, and a school like Tennessee has so many resources and so many branches that it can extend to outside of the state of Tennessee, the North Alabama, the Atlanta area, the Carolinas, all throughout the United States. I mean, there's opportunities for Tennessee athletes, and I think that can help Josh Heupel and this staff maybe play some catch up in recruiting.
I just wonder, Eric, if that's not going to be a huge selling pitch for so many schools within state kids. It's just saying, look, I mean, yeah, you got, okay, our facilities are same. All right, they've been a little bit more successful, but if you stay in your state, you're going to be able to make X amount of more dollars in terms of your name, image, likeness, because it's going to be easier for you to broker deals within your state than it is going to be for you to broker a deal in the town you go to, or to try to use where you're at to broker a deal back to your hometown.
I mean, especially early on too. I mean, you've got, freshmen and sophomore right now, going to the University of Tennessee, and if they're in state, just using the power of social media. I mean, that's an easy way to make some money by doing some Twitter ads or posting a story on your Instagram and all that type of stuff. I think early on, without a doubt, if you're an in-state prospect, especially here in Tennessee, because again, like Ben pointed out, the brand and the fan base and just how there's so much support, it'd be really interesting to see if how much you can make early on in your career. And then of course that would grow. And by the time you are a 4-year player at Tennessee, and, potentially you're an all SEC top player, an NFL draft prospect, it would grow potentially to a national brand or regional brand. I think it'd be really easily. And I think it is a recruiting pitch now for especially in-state talent to consider the University of Tennessee, maybe even more because of what you could potentially make right out of the gates and send back home to mom and dad, or, put in a separate account for your future, whatever the case may be, because I've kind of gauged some of the prices for some of what we're talking about right now. And these guys can certainly be making some money right now, just stepping foot on campus for, maybe not even being there a year.
Yeah.
Well, I look at it this way, is like, a guy like Isaiah Horton. If Isaiah Horton goes to Miami or Florida, now I get it that Miami's got this guy that's giving everybody $6,000. I would say you're going to see a lot of that across college football with your big corporations that are affiliated with schools. Anyway, I just, I would say that Isaiah Horton individually can make more money at Tennessee being a mid-state kid than he ever could at Miami and or Florida or wherever else.
Yeah,
he's like the perfect example for me right now.
Yep, I agree with that. All right, quick fire, rapid fire things. Better NBA player, Keon Johnson or Jaden Springer?
Keon Johnson.
Keon.
I say Keon.
I agree with that one. Better chance of winning a championship in the next 5 years, Rick Barnes or Tony Vitello?
Tony Vitello.
Barnes.
Actually, I'm going to change. I'm going to go Barnes because, I just think that ultimately, Vitello, may not be here long.
Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that in just a second. I think basketball in general is easier because I think the road to get to Omaha is more difficult. You got to, you win 20, 22 games, you're in the NCAA tournament, then you got to be hot for a couple of weeks. You got to win 6. In baseball, I think it's a harder road, as we saw this year. You can be the hottest team one weekend, and then bam, pitching goes away, and then all of a sudden you're in a bad spot there. So I think in a lot of ways, winning, you got to be a little more fortunate probably in basketball, but I think
I
you
would
got to
agree
be
with
more
that.
consistent in baseball all the way through. All right, let's get to the Vitello thing, because this question is on here, and this one has been for you, and as for me as well, to go in depth on this Tony Vitello, Danny White contract that seems to be about facilities and staff money. Here's where I am. I think it's going to get done. I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think that you got some people on vacation. I think they've just kind of said, hey, we'll figure it out, later this month. I don't think it's at some huge standoff where people aren't talking to each other, all that. One of the interesting things in facilities, and I know Tony Vitello has wanted to go fast. I've said this multiple times, Ben, you can't put the bulldozer in there tomorrow. This thing with a public university has got to go through the state building commission. They don't even meet again till July 22nd. You can't even think about getting approval for any kind of funding talk until then. So you can't write it in your contract on July 6th, I don't think, until you get through what you're going to do or what you're going to ask for approval with the state building code. Are you going to have a bond issue? There's a lot of things from a bureaucratic government stuff that's involved in the facilities part of it. That's why I don't know, Ben, if the contract you're going to see is going to have a ton of specifics about facilities in the Tony Vitello contract. That's where I'm at. You take it away.
Yes, I agree. And as I alluded to on Monday night in the chat, I mean, there has been frustration on each side. And I think that's where the Tennessee frustration comes from, that maybe there wasn't the requisite patience there, because as you just detailed, you do have to go through so many hoops in order to get a bulldozer just in the stadium confines to start work. But also on the flip side, and to your point about maybe not a ton of details with the stadium, I think that is also frustrating for Tony Vitello's camp, because this is his third athletic director,
Yes.
I believe. This isn't the first AD that he's had conversations with in regards to stadium renovations and what could be done to the stadium. So I think Tony Vitello would like a detailed layout of what is to come to have in writing. I don't know how that is supposed to be made possible. Obviously, I don't write contracts for a living, but I do think that Tony Vitello would like to have that written out, especially after there was a big article in the local paper with quotes from the AD and the chancellor about committing and being prepared to commit a lot of money to the baseball program. And now it's kind of time to go all in and iron out those kinks. And maybe there's been a toe dipped in the water here or there. So I do think, again, like you said, it'll get worked out. But in trying to give some insight as to why it went from, okay, deal's about to be done the weekend after they lose in Omaha, to a week of really no updates and still trying to iron out some kinks in the details. That's where maybe a little bit of frustration has come from each side, and why it has slowed down to, at times, it's felt like a snail's pace. But again, it's going to get worked out. It's down to details within stadium renovations and staff money, and it's going to get worked out. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yep, I think it'll be done sooner rather than later, but not as soon as anybody wanted it done, and that's generally how these things go. When you're trying to get as many details and as much things as you're trying to get done in this contract. So there's a lot of moving parts in there, and those parts will get moving again once everybody comes back off of the vacation trail here after the holiday weekend. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Blue Water Climate Control Volquest.com mailbag podcast. Be sure and check them out at bluewaterclimatecontrol.com. And thank you for joining us on this Wednesday. We'll be back to the regular podcast schedule starting next week. Be back to 2 a week, but just the one this week because of some travel things and stuff like that. But we'll be back on the regular schedule next week. But for Ben McKee and Eric Kane and Austin Price and Brent Hubbs, thanks for joining us on this Wednesday. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, everybody, and we will talk to you next week on the podcast.